I think there's so much organisations can learn from sport. I was in Hong Kong. It's incredible how you can get these invitational tens teams who can come from all four corners of the world, arrive in Hong Kong on a Sunday, have
Mm.
literally 48 hours together, and then be able to play so well as a team for 2 days and win something at the end of it. But if a group of rugby players can do that so quickly and so effectively, then why are organisations constantly struggling to build and develop high performance teams?
Dan, thank you for joining us today. As we discussed, I thought it'd be a really good opportunity for us to get a little bit of a deeper understanding on who Dan is as a person and who Thirdway is as an organisation. So yeah, really good to have you here on board.
Thanks for having me, mate. Yeah, great to be here, and looking forward to the conversation and seeing where it takes us.
Yeah, nice one. So look, Dan, I think just to get things started, maybe we'll paint a bit of a picture of, who you are and kind of where you've come from on your career journey. So, because it's quite an interesting one, isn't it? You start off and then if you think about like the rugby fields, you think about Hong Kong real estate, leadership search across multiple continents, and now, you're running your own search firm as well. So keen to, really dive a little bit deeper into what that journey has looked like and what's gotten you to this pathway now.
Yeah, I'll try and keep it compact, mate, because it could be the full 25 minutes. But look, essentially, I grew up in Scotland in Edinburgh, studied sports science, the world's most useless degree unless you go into sport, of course. And my first actually graduate job was in recruitment at Hayes Construction and Property and Charlotte Square in Edinburgh. Did that for 12 months, didn't love recruitment, and I actually, left and vowed to never to work in recruitment again. But, looking back, what a great grounding, the old days of like 50 calls in the morning, 50 calls in the afternoon, no LinkedIn recruiter. Everything was done by voice, right? And you have to be pretty good at connecting people and building relationships. So in hindsight, it's the best grounding ever, really, I think for any sort of job. Mate, and then from there, I found myself. I sort of dipped my toe into a bit of resi property in Edinburgh, but then quickly came out to Sydney to play a bit of rugby for a year. Uh, just before I left Australia, a good family friend of mine was Ian Holcroft. I'll give him a shout out. Was head of procurement for Europe at Laing O'Rourke, and he said, "Look, when you come back, give me a shout. I've got a job for you." And actually joined Laing O'Rourke Construction as a procurement graduate on a big project, the Forth Valley Hospital project in Scotland. Loved it. I thought I sort of found my calling, and procurement was cool. Being on these big building sites was really cool. Like learning how things are built was really cool. So I thought I'd just be in procurement for the rest of my days. The global financial crisis had sort of different ideas about that, and the construction industry at the time in Scotland took a massive hit. I got cleaned out with a load of others, and then I've always felt landed on my feet. Very luckily, worked for a great little firm in Edinburgh called McLean Forth. Sort of looked after 150 resi properties there and developed a few properties. And then, mate, turned 30, got really itchy feet, and sort of, I'd always played a bit of semi-pro rugby, so managed to bag myself one last gig, and mate, ended up in Hong Kong, and loved it. I was there for 5 years. Worked in commercial real estate for CBRE, on Hong Kong Island, which was a lot of hard work, a lot of fun. As you can imagine, commercial real estate in Hong Kong, pretty social. But the one thing I did do my time at CBRE sort of really taught me the value of actually being able to consult, and create solutions and provide answers and add value to clients, because it's a really competitive market, right? So you had to go to clients with something different or an idea or solution. Otherwise, you would just lose the work to JLL or Colliers or a Knight Frank or whoever it was. And then, mate, randomly, one of my clients in Saudi was a recruitment company, Dahl and Company, who had just bought a company called Command. They sort of pestered me to come and join them to go and do a real estate recruitment, and I sort of said no for a few months, and then I eventually gave in. And within 3 months, I was on a plane to Saudi Arabia with my boss at the time, a guy called Marco Cassandro, and we were working in Saudi on the very, very early days of the Saudi mega projects when Red Sea and Neom had secret names and everything was under NDA. It was a pretty incredible time, actually. And then from there, mate, 2019, I ended up moving to Saudi for 3 months. That became 3 years. So established the sort of first international recruitment office in Riyadh. Did a load of senior level recruitment across a mega project. So brought in a load of CEOs, EDs, directors into Saudi. Delivered 2 RPOs, which I'd never done. So it was a pretty steep learning curve for me. And then, yeah, came back to Brisbane, where my wife's from. We'd met in Hong Kong. Luke founded a business thereafter with a guy called Kevin Warner, Teleska. Teleska's still going. He bought me out about 9 months ago, and then I established my own business, Thirdway. Sorry for such a long-winded answer, but I don't know how else to compress that.
Yeah. I think, that's a super impressive story to tell. So it makes sense that it's quite long, in all honesty. But one thing I look at really close, and I hear it spoken about a lot, is the translation of, being inside of sporting environments and, those highly competitive environments. That also plays a leading factor into, how people can work inside of businesses and the kind of takeaways behind like structure that sits inside of those
Yeah.
sporting environments. I wonder if it's worthwhile talking a little bit about that from your journey and how that's impacted.
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth talking about. I mean, Thirdway, my business now, my process is built on the principles of high performance sport. I think there's so much you can learn from organizations can learn from sport. And that's, I was in Hong Kong last week at the Hong Kong Tens, sort of a world leading invitational tennis tournament. And actually did a piece on LinkedIn talking about it's incredible how you can get these invitational tennis teams who can come from all four corners of the world, arrive in Hong Kong on a Sunday, have literally 48 hours together, and then they ought to play so well as a team for 2 days and win something at the end of it. And if a group of rugby players can do that so quickly and so effectively, why are organisations constantly struggling to build and develop high performance teams? There's various things in that about sort of vulnerability of players and openness and trust and common goals and alignment. But yeah, to me, there's just so much you can take from I think the values and the lessons of high performance sport and plug that straight into an organization. And it's probably why I see so many ex high performing sportsmen now working as sort of business consultants and business coaches.
Yeah, that's really good insight. And at least you probably wanted to talk a little bit around, because when we've spoken historically, you've spoken a little bit about the kind of shift within recruitment and where recruitment is now to where recruitment needs to be longer term and to maintain relevancy as well.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that, and tell me, from my understanding, that's kind of where Thirdway has been, built around in many ways. Can you tell me what that looks like and why you kind of have gone with that vision?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. I think one thing, like, I have a real love-hate relationship with the recruitment industry. Like, I love it. It's what I do. It's given me a lot, but equally, at times I'm kind of embarrassed by it because there's so much bad in it. Like transactional recruiters, people sort of selling CVs without permission, right? And it's just that people just trying to make money and not caring about the work they do. And recruitment, right, is has a bad name, right? And I spend a lot of my time trying to debug that of new clients. I also think that with the introduction of AI and the speed of AI is coming at the industries at a real crossroads. And yes, for sure, right, there'll be more human engagement and people want more human touch. But for any recruiters sitting there thinking, "Oh, we're immune to AI," we're simply not. And I think you'd be really unwise to think that. Despite I hear that a lot because at the end of the day, it's become a level playing field, right? The selling recruitment traditionally was, well, here, I've got a little black book of candidates here. You never know where they are. And also, you're busy. I've got time. Let me save that. Let me do the work for you. And that was how you sold the one work. But the reality is, you, me, the guy down the road at the coffee shop, anyone can jump on to Juicebox, to Pin, to Claude, to anywhere with a search and map a market pretty effectively within 5 minutes if you know what you're doing. And then again, you can automate campaigns, you can do things. So, the recruitment industry is going to change. It has to change. I think big parts of it will disappear. I think high volume recruitment, blue collar recruitment, middle management recruitment to a degree will vanish. And so I guess Thirdway was in a way thinking, well, where can we add value now and how do we get and how do we, how do we stay ahead of the times and add value to our clients? And I think we do that simply by taking that recruitment process and looking at it sort of in three ways. And I talk about a pre-season phase, like your preparation phase. This is obviously all sport related. Your season phase, which is like your sourcing, your campaign, if you like, the sort of hard graft in the middle, and then the sort of the championship moments, sorry, when you're, making your hire, you're building legacy and building a high performing team. The reality for me is there's no longer much skill in the middle piece, right? Sourcing, finding candidates. Yes, there's obviously nuances to it and how you do it, but that's no longer a sell. So where's the value add has to be? The value add has to be in the preseason element, and obviously in the legacy building championship moments. And so that's what Thirdway does really, really well. Don't
Hmm.
get me wrong, it's not what we don't care about with sourcing piece. We're really, really good at that, but we put a lot of value on the bookends.
Yeah, and look, that makes a lot of sense. I think you see a lot of noise with your following on LinkedIn or social media anywhere. Really, you see a lot of noise, especially from recruiters, where there's almost two fields at the moment. There's those that are, say, okay, we're going to go with AI, we're going to adopt it, we're going to use it like how we need to use it, and then there's those that, to your point before, still almost kind of stuck a little bit behind. They're like, nah, I'm this is what I do. I feel seats up, et cetera, et cetera. But that kind of second group, if they don't kind of catch up at some point, they're going to be left behind, aren't they? Like, if they don't evolve the way they do things, the reality is it's changing that quickly that there's so many tools out there now that can do a lot of that, I guess. I don't want to call it
I
basic work
think
because, like you
so.
said, sourcing's still hard.
Well, it's
It
basic work.
is.
Yeah,
But
it is hard, but I think the hard bit to me is like sourcing's not hard. The hard bit is how do you engage the candidates correctly, right? And that's where a lot of our pre-season work is done. As I said, anyone can source and find candidates now, but not everyone can engage them and get them interested and present a role effectively to them, right? And understand they might only get one opportunity to do that. Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, I worry for those people. Like, frankly, I know it's a big statement and probably a headline for this podcast, but yeah, I worry about them because what's your point of difference?
yeah, I tend to agree with a lot of what you're saying there. And so, we've spoken about at large as part of, our partnership as well. And I'd like to kind of hear about what does that preseason really look like for you? That's one part. But even before I go to that, uh, there's an interesting part. Like you said, it's the engaging of the candidates as well. Something that I've spoken to numerous recruiters about is, and I think it's been a forgotten art in many ways, is how do we actually give back to the candidate? So we're not just doing everything for the client, but we're actually trying to give
Mm.
something back to the candidate as well and show that we're working both sides. Because I've been there as well, having worked in recruitment, I've seen it as well. It's often, well, everything's just about, solving for our client, and then the candidate gets forgotten. And you've probably seen it as well. Then the candidates just get disgruntled. So it's like, well, how do we kind of solve on both sides of that? And I think part of your preseason does that in some ways, but I'm really keen to kind of dive into a little bit about what that differentiator for you actually is.
Why don't we split that into two and we'll just look at the candidate piece and we'll come back to what preseason is. So I think
Perfect.
the biggest recruitment's biggest downfall, right, to me again, is a contingent recruitment model, right? Where it's paid only in success, no win, no fee. So then, therefore, recruiters go to candidates and they don't really tell them who the job is. It's whole cloak and dagger. And so candidates are tired and exhausted of getting, I've seen your profile on LinkedIn, I've got an amazing job, do you want to speak, right? And often, again, they're the wrong person for the role, right? So they get even more frustrated. Then you've got this challenge now of everyone's automating with sequences. So candidates are getting automated emails, automated text messages. And it's just like, it's actually becoming really, really, really hard to get a candidate on the phone because no one replies to emails anymore unless they really want to know who it is. No one answers a phone call anymore from unknown number, unless you get an introduction, right? So that bit's becoming harder. And to me, I only work on retained search, right? So I only work on a retained recruitment model. But what that allows me to do is be really, really transparent when we go to the market and talk to candidates, right? So it's not, do you want a job? It's, hey, we've been retained by X company who are applying, who are recruiting for X role in X location, and here's all the information. And when I say all the information, I say we. It's now I build a microsite on there with an extensive candidate briefing document, press releases about the organisation, EVPs, org structure, as much information as I can get from my clients. But probably the most important thing we do is, now I only work with founders and owners primarily, is a video interview of the founder and the owner. Like, why have you set your business up? What's your 5-year strategy? Why are we in the market for this role? What's this person going to add to the business? What does success look like, in 12 months, 24 months, 36 months? So suddenly as a candidate, when you receive that, it's a different experience, right? And as a result, we get a far higher response rate because people are engaged in the roles. And I had to sort of smile the other day because I had a good sort of half an hour, 45 minutes with a candidate talking about a role. I said, look, have you got any more questions about the role of the organization? He just goes to me, not really, because it's all been so clearly presented in that. To me, I'm like, well, how cool is that, right? And that's good recruitment and that's good search, not just sort of the pray and spray. If I speak to 100 people, I'll get 10 average, I'll chuck them in and so on and so forth, right? So that's the candidate piece. Pre-season is all purely focused on making sure a role's set up for success before we ever go to market. And that's where recruitment generally fails, right? Is because people rush to fill a role because it's reactive. Someone's resigned, or there's a new business opportunity, or there's an expansion, or they've had budget. So it's like, we need to hire, go, 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 go. And it's just sort of done with often like an inconsistent recruitment process. The role's not being really thought out. The stakeholders aren't aligned. There's a great stat like 47% of senior hires fail in the first 18 months, right? But if you break it down, and a lot of these hires now within 6 months, but I think if you break that down, is it really the fault of the candidate, or was whoever going to come into that seat set up to fail? And I think if we're honest and you dig back, most of the time, whoever came into that seat was going to fail, right? We were on a hiding to nothing from day one. And again, that's where a lot of the frustration comes of the industry is that, well, we pay all this money and someone comes and we don't last and we leave in 6 months or 12 months. I think by doing a good preseason, you can actually mitigate that and make sure a role's set up for success. And my thing is, our sort of tagline for Thirdway is purpose beyond placement. And it's something I'm really passionate about. And well, what does that mean? That means we don't to me, the celebration is not we place a candidate. The celebration is in 18 months' time when, hey, that candidate is still here. We're doing an amazing job and the business has changed as a result. Top line's up, bottom line's up, or it's enabled us to go and open a new office, or our staff retention's increased. So that's when we celebrate the placement because we've added value to an organization.
Yeah.
And then beyond that, the preseason mantra comes again from the sporting background. So if you ever hear a press conference, right, McIlroy wins the Masters, Alcarez wins the Open, the Broncos win the NRL, you always hear in the post-match conference, we had an incredible off-season or an incredible preseason. Like we do really hard and laid the foundations. The second piece you always hear is, well, it was complete alignment across the organization, from the kit man to the nutritionist to the physios. Everyone involved in this team was aligned to one singular goal. And the third thing you always hear is, well, we left no stone unturned in the preparation. Simple, real simple. But how often is that sort of thought process taken to recruitment? Not very often. And that's what preseason is all about.
I think, yeah, not often enough. I think when you look at placements as a whole across the industry and how it often works, it's have they worked for the big logo company? Have they worked for a big name? Or have they done, X? That's all great. And yes, on paper, this is where they're going to look like they're going to be a good fit for an organization potentially. And they might interview really well. But to your point, that preseason and the way you're describing it becomes really important because I look at some stuff that we do here at Compono and stuff like around work personality and that style of information. It's like someone may fail because you're putting the wrong personality into a role where, it's basically chaos. And that's okay from the business point of view. You've got to be able to bring someone into a business at every stage of a life cycle. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you've got to be able to look at it holistically as well, that if I'm bringing someone in that's used to being able to work in a really structured environment where everything's kind of served out to them, they're going to probably struggle in an environment where it is chaos and it needs foundations to be built from the ground up. So I think those parts are really important.
100%. And that's what I say to my clients. Well, look, let's just move past the job description. The job description is job description. What does success actually look like in this role in 12 months' time, right? And then you work back for what we actually experience you actually need. Thirdway are aligned with Compono, right? So we go and assess culture, we assess workplace personality. All the things beyond, like the job description is about 1% of it, right? Because that's a tick box, is the job description. Okay.
Needs to be there, but isn't really doing much.
It needs to be there, but that's not, if you're assessing someone only against a job description, that's when it's going to fail, right? And to your point, by having that assessment piece, by having the pre-season alignment, by having the clear understanding of what you're looking for, you end up running a far different recruitment process because there's consistency in assessment of candidates. There's a North Star of what you're looking for in a candidate. And a lot of the work I have to do with founders is like, we met this guy, we want to hire him, he's the best. I'm like, look, that's an emotional hire. You like him because you had a coffee, or her because you had a coffee and you connected on a personal level. But if we just take a minute and take a breath and go back to what we discussed in the preseason and the briefing and what we agreed on, then they're not your person, unfortunately, right? Yeah, they'll be a great friend, but they're not the person we're going to hire here. He's going to take your business to the next level, and it's kind of been strong enough to take that approach, right? Whereas 95% of the industry would be like, yeah, hire them because I want a fee and I want to get out of there.
Yeah, and that's very much reality of human, psychology as well, that often you're going to hire people that are like you because you're going to relate. Yeah. So you're going to hire a very similar personality to you because you can get along on the same level. But is that really what's going to service your business? It might at certain stages, but is that really what's going to service your business? Or do you need someone that's going to be able to challenge what you're doing and offer a different lens to what you're doing? I often use the analogy of looking at, a founder-led business that's looking to go and do capital raising, and then they go to a VC, and you've got two founders that one's a campaigner in Compono's language and one's a pioneer.
Yeah.
So very, those extroverted personalities that come up with really big ideas. And then you might have one other person, which is your CTO, who might be, let's say, a coordinator. But where are the gaps? So, what's the risk that sits there for the VC company when they look at it? It's like, well, do we have people that can be the evaluator, that can analyze the data? Do we have the people that are the potential doers that can actually bring these great ideas to actual life rather than them just sitting there as ideas, which sound really good?
Yeah, I think you're right. And the other thing that does also, I think it's really important, and a lot of people forget is, we don't want to hire for today. We want to hire for 3 years' time, right? We want to look at the business you want to become. So yeah, right, cool. So do you want to hire someone now who can help us go raise funding and then they become useless? Or do you want to hire someone now who can say, well, we can help us raise funding and then they know how to sort of use the fund and we can take the business to the next level. So yeah, you're right. It's about looking at beyond the now, because everyone's like, we need to hire now, we need to hire now. I get that, we do, but we'd only be here in 6 months and 12 months trying to rehire this role because we got the wrong person in. Let's look at the business we want to be 24, 36 months and hire for that.
Yeah, so it's really that end goal versus the person you want to go for a beer with on a Friday night.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, there's got to be a mix, right? You've got to enjoy the people you work with, but you don't,
100%.
everyone's employed that person who they know is not right, and then they can't let them go because they're a good bloke or a good, good woman, and they're like, oh, but we're an amazing person. Yeah, but we're killing your business. Yeah, but we're so nice, and they're a great team member, and you fall into that trap, right? By hiring on that basis.
Sound you just like you're speaking from lived experience, Dan.
I couldn't possibly comment.
Couldn't or won't?
Oh,
Two different things.
it's a different story for a different day.
No, that's completely fair. So, look, that's all really good insight, Dan. If I was a founder right now and I was giving you a call and I was to say, hey, Dan, I need support, but I've been burnt way too many times before.
Yeah.
So I'm really reluctant to pay a retained fee and work with a recruiter. I just need to really understand how you're actually going to solve for me. And I know we've kind of, you've given me some insights before, but how do you handle that call?
Well, I mean, I get that call pretty much every day because no one wants to pay it, no one wants to pay a retainer. I think it's fairly easy. You just work back, so the recruiters you worked with in the past, what was the process? And I sort of say, let me take a guess. They came in, we took a half an hour job brief. If they were really good, they might have come to your office to do it in person. And then they went away for 2 or 3 weeks and they started to throw some CVs at you and you got a bit frustrated. And then you took that process and you went to the next recruiter and you repeated. And they're like, yeah, that was kind of it. And then it's just a case of, well, did they actually take the time to come and sort of spend some time with you or spend time in your business to understand it? Like if I've got clients in Melbourne, I'll jump on the plane, go to Melbourne for 2 days and pretty much stay with my client, right? In the office, go out for lunches, dinners, get to know the team. But beyond that, did they talk to you about the strategy of your business? Like before we even talk about the role, I'm like, what's the business? Like what's happening in business? Where are you revenue wise? Where do you want to be in 3 months? Sorry, 3 years. What's the plan to get there? What markets are you in? So I'm garnering knowledge about the business, and suddenly we're like, oh, this is a bit of a different approach. Someone actually cares about the business and wants to see the business succeed and plug the right person. And then of course we talk about the work we do with Compono. Like we're going to assess your culture, we're going to assess your leadership teams, we're going to have something that we can assess candidates in the way and again, so we know we're getting the right person. And
Do you
we talk
find
about the,
sorry to butt in there,
yeah,
Dan. I think there's a really
yeah,
good point there. Do you, when you work with these clients, because let's be honest, they often come in and say, I need someone now. Yeah. They're like, I just need
yeah,
someone in the seat. I need someone yesterday, the old analogy. But that conversation piece, when you have to sit with them and say, well, look, we actually need to slow things down a little bit because reality is we want to make sure that we put the right person into a business that's going to make you more successful. And by us slowing down and doing that, it's actually going to speed you up in some ways. But you've
yeah,
got to be able to
absolutely.
take the slower approach and let us assess your culture. Let us do this groundwork to make sure that we bring the right person in. What does that look like from a founder's lens like when you talk to them about that? Because when they're already heightened and they're already like thinking they need someone there, how do you approach that?
I think there's two things. I think often, they get it, and I'm like, well, look, this is going to take 2 weeks, for example. So when you're already struggling to find someone, you've already probably wasted a month or two trying to find someone. The reality is, what's another 2 weeks? 10 working days, not much. Let's face it. I think sometimes I feel a sense of relief because someone's like, "It's cool, like we'll get the person. Let's just take a breath. Let's just get our ducks in order. Let's do the groundwork." And they're like, I think often it's a sense of palpable release that they feel like, oh, like someone actually gets it. Because that's the thing about us founders is we're all built a bit differently. Probably all on the spectrum somewhere. Most of us got ADHD. We operate differently. And I think having been a founder and being a founder, that probably helps too. Just say, listen, I get it. I understand you're in panic mode here, you're struggling, but this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to solve a problem. This is how we're going to get the result. And you can actually see, like, cool, like finally, someone, like you can almost see in their face that, someone gets it. Like I feel safe, I feel heard, I feel understood. And I think that's the first building block. And in all honesty, like Justin, like I hate doing it, but sometimes I turn work away. Right? Someone's like, "Nah, we just not interested in that. We just want to CVs." I'm like, "Awesome," but I'm not your guy for that. So, yeah,
Yeah, if you
take
want
it or
that,
leave it,
just go
sort of
put a
thing.
job app on Seek and you'll get a whole heap of CVs in the door.
100%, right? Or go down the road to any of the high street recruiters. I'm sure someone will do a good job for you. But yeah,
Yeah, probably leads me to my next kind of thought as well. And it's something I often think about is founders will tell you one thing at the start. Yeah. Like they will talk to you and they will, or, the leader that you talk to, they'll give you the base level, but it's what they kind of say behind closed doors that's often most important. So not what's necessarily on the board notes or what's not on the job brief initially, but what's actually said behind closed doors. How do you get into that? Like, how do you, because that's a really
yeah.
important, powerful lever, but often they're quite reserved in sharing some of that.
I think really simply because I've been a founder, right? Like I've obviously founded Thirdway, but before this, I co-founded Teleska, right? And have been on the journey of hiring a team quickly, of scaling quickly. The challenges that comes with having a business partner has its own. It's a great thing, but also has its own challenges. So I think there's just for me, I'm probably looking at that regard as a mutual respect and a mutual understanding, and so I kind of know what's going on in the background, right? Or know where to probe them. Oh, this happened to me. Has it happened to you? And they're like, oh yeah, that's where we're at in a minute. And then you have trust. It's about building trust and mutual respect and allowing people a space where they can open up and be a bit more vulnerable and let you in. And again, if I feel like someone's not letting me in, then I can't really fill a job for them.
Yeah, so it's really, and this is what I'm trying to take away, it's almost moving away from that transactional lens, which a lot of them haven't, and moving towards that
Yeah.
real commercial decision. That's what recruitment needs to be seen as. It needs to be seen as something that's going to impact the business overall long
Yeah.
term and not just what's going to be having someone there that, it feels like a win because you got someone in the seat, but the bigger picture is often forgotten.
Yeah. And I think unless you've been in that seat, unless you've founded a business and you've taken the risk or you put your own money up front or you've had sleepless nights and no one to talk to and you're thinking about your business 24/7, unless you've been in that seat is kind of it's hard to relate to, right?
Yeah. No, I get that completely. And look, full transparency, Compono, we've spoken about a little bit. We're obviously a partner with yourselves at Thirdway. So keen to talk about it honestly as well.
Yeah.
What does the platform actually change for you in the way that you go about search? And was there a specific moment in the process where, it shifts what you do for a client to the kind of end outcome or the goal?
Yeah, look, I think for me, I was always really keen to most of the work I did around culture was observational, right, and judgment focused, but I was really keen to add some psychology, right, and some assessment to it. But I also always really recognize, well, organizations are quick to assess candidates coming in. But if you only do that on one side, well, what are you assessing against, right? Because every business is
Mm,
different. So to be able to add some context for that, I think is really, really important. And to be able to sort of go back to them and say, listen, here's where your culture is currently, which is, it is what it is. I'm not there to change a culture. I'm not there to be a performance coach because I'm not, that's not my skill set. There's other people that are really good at that. But say, look, here's your culture here. We need to make sure when we bring someone in, they're not going to disrupt that. And fair enough, if you want to move a culture forward, then let's bring someone who'll move it forward, but not someone who's 200 meters forward because that wouldn't work and will fall apart pretty quickly. And equally, if we're trying to move away from a culture let's not hire someone who's already thinking that culture or just behind it. So it just allows you to put much more context and accuracy, I think, to when you're bringing in candidates. And I also think it's a really cool tool for founders. People say, "Actually, I didn't realize that," or "I thought we were here, but actually we're here." And, certainly I can tell a great story of my own time as a founder. We went and did sort of Gallup strength assessments for everyone, and we had introverts. We didn't realize they were introverts, and I was like, "Why does this person never want to come to a conference? I've been trying for months," and I was like, "Oh, that makes perfect sense. They don't want to do that, and we never ask that person to do that again, right?" And you're able to once you understand your people a bit more deeply, you're able to actually say, "I've still got some really good people here, but are potentially in the wrong seat." You can make some internal changes and get your team ticking a bit further forward. Man, it's a great tool. And again, what you don't know what you don't know, and I hate that saying. So I'm annoyed I've come out of it. But for a lot of people, we don't know because they've never done it, and only once you know can you start to take action.
Yeah, I love that. It really is that. It's kind of, and I can talk from obviously the work that you're doing as well. It's that shift away from, being a gut feel kind of approach, and or even just the post on the wall of value propositions to actual real data led positioning for yourself.
Yeah, and I
Which,
think it's got to be a combination of both, right? I think gut still plays a part, but having the gut backed up with data rather than just gut is even better.
yeah, your gut doesn't lie, and I know that from my own recruitment days. Your gut typically doesn't lie. It's generally, your first instinct is quite often your right instinct.
Yeah,
But when you're actually dealing with, the founders that you're dealing with, and be able to say, hey, this person's great, but actually then back that up with real data that's not just words, it's
yeah,
super impactful.
and it becomes even more powerful. I think if I think across, all the placements I've done in my life, I said to him, I reckon 80% of placements, if I hadn't sort of gone in and fought the corner and said, "Look, you need to speak to this person," would have never got an interview because people are so used to just hiring against paper or hiring against CV, right? And not thinking outside the box. But once you've got all that understanding of the type of person we need, what the culture's like, and I'll say, "Clients, listen, you're going to say no to this person on paper, but I want you to interview them, if you trust me." And 9 out of 10 times, the sort of the wild card, if you like, is the person who ends up getting the job.
Yeah, that's really interesting you say that, because we often talk about, like, there's the quadrant that kind of sits there. It's like, because when you think about how businesses have to typically recruit historically, it is, you got to look at something. So you got to look at the paper. That's how you're going to analyze for a first interview, generally speaking. You got to look at it and say, do they have the skills or the qualifications match? Have they got the work history that we kind of required? But then what about, I kind of call them like the golden nuggets that kind of sit in the dirt and they're kind of hidden away. The ones that don't necessarily look right on paper, but are right. So they're kind of at that bottom level of the quadrant, and they're like your golden gems. And, imagine being able to find them, because at the moment, as it stands, you're not going to find them. Whereas
No, you don't.
historically,
Yeah,
you're just
unless
looking for
yeah,
the unicorn, if you like.
yeah, and of course I'm biased, but that's the value of working for a recruitment partner, be it me, be it anyone else, right? If you get the right partner, they'll find the nuggets for you. They'll push people a bit deeper and draw things out that they might not have known about and say, "Actually, you're perfect for this job," and that experience isn't on your CV, but that's really valuable. Can we get that forward? And the one thing we do is, as part of our process, is all shortlisted candidates report, do a short video interview.
Yeah.
Because I want people to be able to bring their CV to life. I don't want candidates to have to rely on a bit of paper and my notes. It's here's my recommendation, here's a bit of paper, but here's an introduction to the candidate as well.
Yeah. That's really good. So yeah, you pretty much just fill it with the actual real data. It's going to show them the why. So, but hey, look, I also know you run your own podcast as well. So
Yeah.
the Founders Fire podcast, and you're often sitting with founders as part of that come from founder-led businesses. What is it you're actually hearing on the street at the moment? What are the key challenges that you've heard as part of that podcast and that you're kind of sharing? So I'm not talking about the super polished LinkedIn kind of content or the super
Nah, well,
polished social media stuff, but the real stuff.
I think that's why the podcast exists, and actually, really, obviously, Rudy founder of Compono is coming on next week, so that's pretty cool. The whole aim of a founder's fire is to talk about the real life of being a founder, right? And there's a lot of podcasts out there that celebrate your success, and rightly so. Like we started a business on a shoestring and sold it, exit for $100 million, right? And there's a lot of those stories, and yes, people want to hear those stories. But having been a founder myself, people actually sometimes that's not relatable because it's in the future or you can't quite imagine it. And yes, it might happen one day, but actually, you want to know about the time the founder had to pay the wages on the credit card, or the time they wanted to quit, or when the marriage fell apart, or the kids weren't talking to them and they felt like a bad mom or a bad dad because they were so focused on the business. I think founders want to hear actually the real honest story of the real honest journey of being a founder. And so that's why I created the Founders Fire. And also, secondly, because, being a founder, again, you don't really have anyone to talk to because no one else gets it. So, like, yeah, you've got your husband, your wife, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, but they don't really get it because they're not carrying the same level of stress. And you're probably generally protecting them from the stress by carrying it yourself. Your friends don't really get it because they're not in the same position. So then who have you got to talk to? Often it's no one. So that's why I created the Founders Fire to be able to sort of I think for founders to have reflective and cathartic conversations, but also I know there'll be founders out there at the moment who will benefit from hearing those conversations. But cool, like, well, I'm in that situation now, and I didn't think he'd be in it, but we were in it, and we can get through it. So that's the aim of the Founders Fire. It's almost like confessions of a founder. And we really shy away from the success. And I had a great conversation yesterday with Phil DeBella. Phil's story's been told hundreds of times of his success story, but we actually spoke about all the difficult stuff he's been through. It was an amazing conversation, and Phil was super vulnerable and open, and that makes all the difference.
Yeah, that's really good because you look at social media and you look at, as I said, LinkedIn's and all those, and even other podcasts, it's often just celebrating the success. And that's great. Like, everyone's excited by success and, the wins in life. But even, for every win, there's all the hurdles that founders have to jump through to get there.
Listen,
And when you kind of get under the pin of whether that's, funding raises, it's not as all polished and happy days as it looks, is it?
never. And even last night, I was up sweating about cash flow in my own business, right? No one's immune. No one's immune at all. But yeah, the world of social media, it looks like everyone's winning, so therefore you feel like you're failing. But that's not the case at all.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to listening to a few more of those sessions and especially Rudy coming on next week. Look, one last one. We've spoke about it at length at the start, 20 years, you've been across multiple continents, hundreds of hires that you've made across that time as well. If there is a founder listening to this, what is the one takeaway that you want them to have?
Good question. I think the biggest one for me is don't rush to market. Just do your preparation work. And I actually did a webinar yesterday for a group of founders. And the last piece was next time before you go to market, get all the stakeholders in the room. And if you can't agree on what success looks like, what the role exactly is, and how it's going to impact the business, then put the brakes on and don't go to market. Because that's the most simple piece of advice I can give. But that's the biggest mistake people make.
Slow down, think about it, make the right decision.
Just
Again,
get it right.
it's easier said than done though, isn't it?
Yeah, of course it is. Which is why why my business exists, right? To come and help you in that. But yeah, just get it right first time. Do it
Yeah. And
properly. Get it right first time.
you share feedback a lot with the founders, don't you, as well? It's like, hey, look, yeah, I want to work with you and we are going to work together. But before we do that, you do need to slow down. And we need to actually look at this more
Yeah,
holistically.
all the time. And if they don't, and again, if the founder's like, no, I just want CVs, I'm like, cool, Thirdway is not your organization. Because my thing is, and it does sound sometimes cliche, but like, my success is in their business growth success. So like, and I say to people like, well, like if I get invited to a Christmas party in 5 years, and we've hired 3 or 4 people in that business, and the business is firing, how good is that? Like that's
Yeah.
impacting my job, right? That's really cool, and that's what the aim of the third.
Yeah, perfect. Awesome. Look, Dan, it's been a really great discussion. I've really enjoyed having you on today and discussing your own story of where you've come from and where Thirdway is and it's going. I'm really excited by our partnership that we have with Compono and Thirdway, but also being able to kind of watch really closely about, the results that are coming in for you and the kind of journey that you're on.
Yeah, mate, it's been awesome. Loved working with you guys today, and yeah, it's only going to go from strength to strength. So, thanks for having me on and let me waffle on and tell the story a little bit.